Welcome to the GCC Steering Committee Q&A. This is the subset of the Steering Committee. Got Jim Wilson, Ian Lance Taylor, Ramana Radhakrishna, and I know this PA is not on. It's just too, okay, we can.
It's just mentally confusing. I'm getting cognitive dissonance with talking in a microphone and nothing happening.
Well, this is the one where
Yeah, that's even
he can dance better than speak. Right, there you go. Make sure the heads don't get touched.
Yes.
Keep that one on your person, so click that on.
If we're going to be passing around is the problem.
We'll just pass around the one for the video. Nobody wants to hear them, so they want to hear you.
Or I can pass around separately and have the video one person's being recorded and the PA another person being recorded. This will be really confusing. So this is a Q&A, so start answering our questions. Or you could ask questions too.
Can you comment on the move to Git?
Yes, when are you going to do it?
You should probably repeat the question.
What can we comment on the move to Git? That's a great idea. When are you going to do it?
I think everyone's in. I think everyone's in favor of moving to Git, but someone has to drive it.
I think Jason wanted to.
So Richie says Jason wanted to, and I hope that will happen.
We just
Last
waited.
week, Jason still is planning to, he's done a lot of the work, he was evaluating Eric Raymond's repo searching tool. I think he's decided doing it without that will give us a better result, but he's not had time to finish it off. So he's still planning on doing it, he still wants to do it.
But it's unclear if it will, if he will manage to do it in stage 1.
Okay, so what I heard was that Jason Merrill is still planning on doing it, and we hope it'll happen in this stage 1, but it may not.
It's like Ghostbusters, don't let the streams cross. Okay, that's settled. Next. Yes, but I.
Is there a chance to remove the front cover and back cover pages from the manual pages?
No.
It's a question for him.
Repeat the question.
Is there a possibility to remove the front cover and the back cover from the manual pages?
You're saying because it makes it incompatible with free licenses because of GFDL restrictions?
Yes.
But it's not just removing the front pages, it's, you know.
Changing the license.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, manual pages obviously don't have any front and back cover pages, but they are covered by a license which has invariant sections.
Yeah.
And this allows me to remove the front cover and back cover.
So you're not talking about the manual. You're not talking about the manual, but you're actually talking about the man pages.
About the main pages, yes.
Wait, you're not talking about the manual? The manual is the only thing that's GFDL that has the invariant for the front matter and back matter.
So the problem is that you have, one file of Techi, which is used to generate the main pages.
Yeah.
But that still is covered by the GFDL with the invariant sections.
Yeah.
So my question is, why can't you just drop just from this one file the requirement of the invariant sections?
So the issue is that there are some invariant sections, and even though the man pages in the manual are separate, apparently because of the conversion process, you believe it's still dependent upon or covered by this license, and you're asking if we can remove that. And
Do the man pages have the invariant sections in them? Do they have the front? Are they actually in the man pages? I haven't looked recently.
It's not an inherent violation or a license.
I don't think I have them.
I would have to check, but if
I don't see them.
No.
Don't
So we have a report that they aren't there, even though they are required.
So it should be a violation.
So so we're on one already in violation, so, okay.
Yeah, but that would require the man pages to have the front matter and the back matter
Yeah.
at the front and the back of them, would be silly.
The very bottom of the man page says
yeah, it
the
refers
front
to
cover
the.
text is
Oh, it does
the
say
GNU
it.
manual.
Okay, so there is something at the
GNU manual.
bottom of the
So, yes,
man
there is
page,
something there. There is a front cover text.
But
and
it's
back
not
cover
included,
text.
it's by reference.
but not included by reference. Okay, so we aren't in violation. Well, that's now we can sleep. So,
Establish we're not violating it. Do we want to?
Is the other question the removal of the invariant section?
Well, just for this one file, yes.
so we want to remove, so there's a proposal to remove the invariant section. I just need to repeat it for the camera, just for this one file.
Invoke dot.
Invoke
But
that.
is that used to build the manual? Would it also remove the invariant section from the manual?
No, because that invoke.txt is just an include file, which gets included in the main Teki file. So you still have the front back cover requirement in the generated Teki info manual.
So can't we just have a special exception to that particular source file? So if it's used to produce a man page, it doesn't have to have the invariant sections.
There's also CPP.teki for the CPP manual, which probably has the same issue.
Given that we are in England with the
More
proper
than
language,
one file.
yes, we can. May we is a different question.
Well, you can ask.
I mean, I just simply don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. This is, I guess we will take this under advisement and ask RMS and the FSF, because that is the, as the buffer between the GCC community and the FSF, this is,
Can you give us the short version of the argument for why we should do this?
Well, because at least Debian says Debian can't ship software which users are not allowed to modify. Therefore, I have to remove the manual pages and the other tech info documentation and can't build and distribute them in Debian. So that's the main argument.
okay, so can you send me or someone on the steering committee a short proposal about this that we can then raise in the steering committee specifically to RMS? Would expect that RMS would be interested in helping Debian, so we'll let him detangle this.
So, and I think the other point is that in glibc, our problem is that the GFDL front matter, back matter invariants prevent you from using any of that text in a tooltip for any kind of UI. Because if the text has the invariant, your tooltip now has and then the and then a tiny amount of text for the tooltip you're trying to load. So, I mean, it clearly made sense when it was a manual, but this is really a lot of useful data that now has an invariant section that makes it more difficult to use than it should.
So Carlos says this also,
GFDL is fine,
Yeah.
it's just the invariant.
this apparently also impacts tooltips, and if you're popping up some, I guess, if I infer correctly, some sort of a suggestion or a blob from the manual page in the midst of this, that the GFDL requires a large amount of front matter and back matter bracketing a one sentence suggestion. So could you send that to the steering committee as well, and we will raise this as well. Just as you said, this is sounds like a request for an exception. We can definitely propose this. Please bear in mind that things like the GCC runtime exception, which appeared and was very helpful, were years in the making. So this is not a. We will definitely discuss this, but it's not don't expect the response from RMS and the FSF could be we don't know when this will be resolved, but we will raise the issue. Any other? Yes.
How do I contact the steering committee? Do you have steering committee?
Basically, I mean, the steering committee membership is listed there's a link on the front page of the website, and you can contact, any of the people,
Okay,
Who-
but there's now steering.
there's no general public steering committee mail alias. The other thing is, people will send to the main GCC mailing list and say, Dear Steering Committee on that, and most, those of us who are,
Dear steering committee. Okay, I can do that.
yes?
I'm not sure if this is a question for steering committee, and I asked this yesterday in my talk. Is steering committee okay with accepting the brick front end after it passes technical?
So the question is, is the steering committee okay to accept into GCC this Brig front end? And I guess we need to have, I think that we need to formally vote to accept it. I think we've addressed, if I understand, all of the licensing issues that came up before. I think those were already, so if you,
Yeah, we only, it's just the header files API, and we basically take them from the documentation, and hopefully the next versions of HSA, these will not be under the Illinois license, which is an open source license, just requires some disclaimer somewhere, which we don't like, but we license it under some really.
okay, so we hope the license will be issued. So if you could, again, just email the steering committee with a formal proposal, I'd like, whoever.
This is a front end that accepts HSA as input?
Yeah, the binary format.
Okay, right, but HSA is kind of an assembler language. So there might be GPL issues. There's been cases before where, you don't want to make it too easy for people to avoid linking with the rest of GCC. Another compiler can emit HSA and then feed it into GCC without actually linking with GCC. And
It's not actually general purpose enough to be useful for general programming.
okay, well, it's an issue RMS might bring up.
But it's similar to Java.
Yes,
Yeah.
to Java. So we had the Java front end which only took bytecode.
Okay,
So there's a question that this had some characteristics of an assembler and might be used for low-level input, but in concept is similar to Java, and GCC has had a Java front end, so there's hopefully Java bytecode, so hopefully there won't be.
I'll just comment that any proposal to add this needs to come with a maintainer, and we have to have some confidence that the maintainers are going to be around for several years.
Or we take the front end out again.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
happened with Go. If you just Can we remove PCH? Now that we
So can we remove PCH? And I'm not sure that that's a steering committee decision. I mean,
Technical
This-
decision.
yes, you can.
Let's do it.
well, we should deprecate it first and then remove it.
Oh.
Well, is anyone using it?
we didn't deprecate Java.
So we didn't officially deprecate Java, but Java deprecated itself before. So it as I said, this is a technical decision, not a
I mean, so
administrative.
technically somebody needs to send a patch and I can improve it as global reviewer, but he didn't.
Yeah.
You write it yourself, you can't improve it.
I need a patch. We have a patch.
Okay, so patch is welcome, and apparently Max has sent a patch, and it has now been approved by Richie, and so resolved, and the motion for reconsideration has been laid on the table. Next.
It's probably more to the community as a whole. Are we happy with our current release schedules and maintenance periods? Or should we look to do something a bit more like Linux with having LTS versions?
So the question is, are we as a community happy with the current release schedule? and maintenance timetables, and do we want to approach something more like Linux with LTS releases, or, I mean, I guess there's also, I mean, there's like this continuous releasing. I mean, there are many, just as another option that wasn't mentioned by Richard or Earnshaw from the floor, but I mean, I guess it's sort of two questions. I mean, again, this is me just personally. There's one with whether we're happy or not, and the second is if we aren't happy, do we have the resources, or who is willing to do something different? So yes, we may have, you know, there's happy versus not happy, and orthogonal with that is action versus non-action. So, any comment? It seems more like a question to the release managers and the.
But so I mean, like, it's unclear to me exactly what the current approval process is for backporting the stable branches. I think for GCC, it was just, you just go and check it in if master was okay, right?
That's true, for regressions.
For regressions.
Yeah.
I mean, so the question is, yeah, I mean, what's allowed to be backported?
Rules for the branches which everyone should
They document
obey, and
The rules for the branches as
exceptions
yeah,
are always possible for backporting.
exceptions are possible, or I mean, I'm just repeating that it's to a large extent. I mean, within the purview of, I guess I'll sort of extend this more of the maintainer for that area. That regression, I mean, patches to fix regressions to any of the open branches are allowed.
Yeah, so I mean, Richard, is the question like, are you asking, can the community please find more people to volunteer to maintain long-term support branches?
Well, it's to do as much as anything with closure of the branches after the FSF stops maintenance.
Okay.
We close all the Bugzilla things that are outstanding on those releases. We drop almost any reference to other than perhaps known to fail out of Bugzilla. We stop accepting any patches to those releases. We could have a lot of different ways of essentially extending the life of it. Now, I don't want to create a lot of extra burden for the maintainers, or the release managers, because we all know it's a shit job to have to do. And if you drag it out for longer, then backporting just becomes harder and harder and harder. But on the other hand, we have customers, or whether they are external customers or other people within this room, who do have to maintain these tools for much longer periods than the FSF does. And there's a massive disconnect between what we do today as a group and what everyone else is having to do and pick up after that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
There's therefore division of resources that perhaps if we pulled it, we could all do a better job.
And we do that in glibc. So what we've done in glibc is said, when the release comes out, you have to register yourself as an interested party in that branch. And that branch will not get closed without discussion to the interested parties. And if the branch does get closed, it's because the interested parties said, we don't care about the branch anymore. But those interested parties are responsible for the backports. And so there's a libc stable mailing list that receives the backports being done by other active backporters. And it's your responsibility to monitor the list, see what people are putting in, think, hey, that should also go into the branch that I'm interested in, and it's still an open, potentially long-term stable branch for however long you want to maintain it. And then that just goes on that way.
So you don't designate
I'm
it.
open to ideas in all sorts of areas here. I'm just saying, here's a question to us as a group of developers.
Let me take a moment to sort of repeat where we are with this. I mean, that Richard was mentioned that the FSF officially closes branches on this more calendar type of cycle, or just a certain number of releases and it's closed, whereas various constituents and members of the community, either amongst themselves or Linux distributions or whatever, may have or do have need for longer term releases, longer term maintenance, and the problem is all the Bugzillas get closed, it just won't fix. I mean, everything just sort of disappears and there's no way to really track what's happening in the branch, even though there may be some, not just individuals, but some sort of commercial need for that. And Carlos mentioned that on libc, that there are people are able to register as interested in a glibc branch, and the people who register are responsible for the backporting, but there seems to be a little bit more, if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, sort of distribution of effort to the people who actually are interested, and it's their responsibility to handle it, and also to pay attention to what patches can or cannot be backported or would be of interest to backport. And when they run out of time or patience or effort, that the branch then gets closed. So, and that as a possibility, and this is not again, coming back and forth, not a specific requirement. This is just, I think Richard was saying, just a discussion of, are there other alternatives, and should we be considering that? Hopefully I paraphrased that correctly.
I think if we do something like that, we should make it clear between the phases. So it shouldn't be that the branch stays open with some different rules, but it's really closed and perhaps copied somewhere else where it has very different rules. Like
Yeah, I mean, so
only wrong code issues and
Yeah.
nothing else.
I mean, there's a question about how we handle these different
Probably
rules.
should
Yes.
close Bugzilla as we do now, because otherwise we wouldn't ever close any bugs, because there is some release.
Oh.
We don't support.
I think what is better is to properly, if we close bugs, properly still note a version that is failing still, even if you close it. Like if we're closing the 4.9 branch at the 4.94 as known to fail.
But
To the
why
bugs.
close them?
Because
close the bugs?
Bugzilla
Do you know how many bugs we have?
The bugs don't go away. They're all still in the database. It's just a
Yeah.
tag on the bug, whether it's open or
But
closed.
Yeah,
some people even go through old bugs, and if there are too many open, just
There's
I'm
like
not
10,
like-
how many bugs? There's at least 8,000 bugs open right now.
But what does that matter?
Okay,
I mean, what matters is, what
Because-
obviously matters is if the bugs are tied to an active branch, and those bugs are what you should be filtering and looking at.
except for you can't filter exactly that with the current Bugzilla.
Well, so
And-
you're saying that because of a technical problem, you're
No,
So I guess what we would
there's
need
the
to
time
have is like
associated with the technical
clone
problem.
each bug for each release it happens in, so we can close bugs at all. But then we explode the number of bugs.
But perhaps if we had these longer term branches which are under different rules, then perhaps we could clone the bugs just for those branches a bit clear with something.
It's also just a matter of scripting the XML RPC interface for Bugzilla, but you're right, you do get a lot more bugs. I mean,
Or maybe
in Red Hat commercially, that's what we do. The bugs get cloned into the longer term branches, into the products. But then it's the responsibility of the registered owners to manage those bugs, and when they shut down the branch, all those bugs get killed. So, but you never have to look at it because they're gonna get moved. So, and maybe
Well, I think this sort of, don't want to
maybe
just open a can of worms, but I think this in some ways is a question, is the current relationship between the FSF development and releases and the Linux distros, which are the major deployment, release deployment mechanism, good? I mean, I don't know if it's ideal, but I mean, is it, because, I know that right now, the various Linux distros basically sort of have their own branch already for pieces, and they're already backporting different changes. Is this working out satisfactorily?
Really, so as soon as we stopped doing that, and we are now trying to push our customers to use the current active FSF release. So we are about to ship GCC 6 to them.
So SUSE is apparently changing the policy. Red Hat, I think,
So
still
what was
has.
your policy change? Sorry, I just want to hear it clearly.
For our older products like /10 or /12, we from partners we accepted lots of backport requests of features and whatever to the stable GCC we had in the district. It was /10 was 4.1, /11 was 4.3, and we still maintain those, at least 4.3. But now for /12, we have the compiler that we built the packages for, which we don't change during the lifetime. But then we have the compiler our customers are supposed to use, which is currently GCC 5, and we are about to upgrade that to GCC 6, and we are no longer accepting feature backport requests from our partners because we say
We have something similar. Well, but the system compiler is the primary one.
sure, but
That's what we changed.
but
Well, for bug fixes, we still backport stuff.
we,
So, and I think Richard's comment is if you're moving forward because you're finding there's an increased cost to maintain the older LTS branch.
no, it's not really the cost of maintaining it like for bugs, but people request features on that old release. So it's completely different than LTSS because LTS it doesn't mean you get new C++ features, but people are using C++. Like SAP wants C++ 14 on GCC 4.3. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Right.
Or
So-
4.7. I have the same issue, so, yeah.
Yeah, because again, I think it's probably better for the distros to talk about this, but I think that there's more and more demand from customers to have a longer term stability and just sort of roll in new features for the Linux distros than, having these major, flag day upgrades. And so the question is, with having customers who are using older releases of Red Hat or SUSE for long periods of time, but want to use this on more modern hardware and have more modern features for not just building their applications, but the system, how to, again, this is an issue for the distros to figure out how to handle that, but I think the question is there something that the GNU community for, FSF, glibc, FSF, GCC, FSF, binutils can do to simplify that or to somehow coordinate with that.
I mean, like for binutils and GDB, our customers are used to getting version updates just via the regular online updating since forever. It was only the compiler that was supposed to be stable in some way. So have known bugs and known features. Yeah, we usually have to revert the default behavior changes to keep the behavior stable, but yeah. I mean, like the customers are now happy with the regular kernel updates. There's a new kernel every 3 months. There's a new glibc every 6 months.
So, I mean, I guess the question is does Upstream think that they can help the distros coordinate their work on LTS branches? And I think for glibc, the answer has been yes, right? Because if the distros are willing to step up and maintain the branch.
The fact is, in glibc, there is not a central stable branch maintenance effort separate from the distro maintainers.
There is, absolutely. You're just not involved in it.
No, there is, but it is not independent of the distros. It is a collaboration between the distros who care about that particular stable branch. So it's not an additional burden for the glibc core maintainers. It is just we're happy for our all of our infrastructure on sourceware in different branches and different Bugzilla categories and whatever to be used as a means of collaboration for all the different distros who are doing backports to share their work. And I think that makes sense in the GCC community as well, and you have to figure out how to use the infrastructure in a way that allowing those who are interested to continue to collaborate as opposed to just each work in their own silos all doing the same things over again, which is what we have today. Everybody's backporting the same fixes, so why not collaborate on that? But using common GNU infrastructure to collaborate that way is a good thing, but attempting to have upstream maintainers being burdened by the existence of that effort is a bad thing. So just arrange the procedures so that you separate those things. And for us, it's not been a real problem because basically we don't have any separate, we don't have any separate notion of somebody whose job is just to maintain this stable branch. The only people maintaining stable branch is exactly the collaboration of the multiple distros who are actually concerned with it for their downstream products. So I think GCC can do that.
But you're not doing releases of those branches, right? You only have the original.
Well, we don't do tarball releases. We have sort of.
It's a rolling point release.
It's a
for
rolling
that
point.
branch.
Right. It's right. Those branches are sort of the central point for collaboration between the distros who are maintaining something based on that version. And then there's some sort of consensus of those distros when you say, okay, it's worth declaring this to be, whatever, 0.3. And then they do that, but
basically what I'm saying is.
but there isn't a central release of the stable branch.
There's a new GDC version. You do one release and then you start developing, and somebody might be interesting and maintain that branch. And
Right.
And with GCC we have 2 active FSF managed releases where we do tarball releases for 3 years. It's completely different.
Well, no, I mean, it's not completely different. It's just that you're doing more. You needn't do any more than you're currently doing. We've decided we can do less than that as the central upstream effort. But you needn't do more than that. But the fact that that's all you're going to do as a upstream official maintainership effort doesn't mean that other people can't collaborate on official GNU infrastructure to maintain things that are not centrally maintained.
Everybody with commit access can branch the closed 4.8 branch and make that the official collaboration point and put patch
Right.
on it.
Right, and I mean, and the policy about like what the branch namespaces are and how you use the bug database need to be figured out.
I think that the question is around what do we do with Bugzilla?
Well, Bugzilla, branch namespaces, do you make it public that this is the intent to be okay with that? Because I think distro maintainers might, if they even have commit to create the additional branches, might be wary of doing so without upsetting the core maintainers and saying like, why is there this extra branch? Why are you adding Bugzilla keywords? Why are you,
Well, it depends. If you add a branch in your namespace or your company namespace, nobody will say anything.
No.
So the question is just if we want to do something in some common namespace,
Or you can add
create a namespace for this.
CSS namespace and whatever. But the question about Bugzilla remains, and the question to me is if we have this like consumer-oriented maintenance of whatever is there's interest in maintaining, do we really need to continue having two active, officially supported branches we do releases of, or can we reduce that to 1?
Yeah, how do you know that those branches are being, the other branches being used, right? You could be
Well,
doing
no,
twice
no, no.
as much work
Oh,
for-
well, this is where I think you need to realize that there are more, at least I'm fairly confident there are more consumers of GCC than diverse consumers, shall we say, of GCC than binutils and glibc. The glibc is the system library for Linux. I mean, for GNU Linux, excuse me, and GNU system and whoever. And GCC is able to target a wider variety of systems. And I think people would use binary releases that. So the main, I mean, I think possibly the only real, however, a huge percentage of people will get glibc through a Linux distro. And I think that there are people who are using GCC and GDB on, I mean, again, just AIX, on HPUX, on other systems where a binary tarball like that, or through a different, their own sort of RPMs or however they're doing, building official things that aren't just through a Linux, apt-get or yum or whatever other thing. So I think just we need to bear that in mind, that there's still this other consumer space.
And there's also the
embedded space, consumer space a little bit too, which is slightly different than the distros. It is in itself the embedded space is their own distros, but they're so if you look at Yocto uses actually the point releases right now.
So I mean, you know, I mean, I guess I'll just sort of enter it again. I mean, you could say that, okay, that's another constituency and they should be responsible themselves and somehow collaborate.
Yes.
But, you know, that's
So we are still doing all the snapshot generation, right? Also from the active branches. Once we maybe move to Git and not have the date stamp update every day, we could do this for the branches that are less active. We could create the full tarballs instead and do this only when there was some changes. So we get automatically a new head tarball release from the branches, like at most every week, but maybe not every week if nothing happens.
Oh, but for SVN we can do the same. Just ignore the timestamp.
Yeah, sure. Or not do the timestamp updates, or do it at post commit or whatever.
But anyway, in the current module.
That we made our tarball creation process is actually just verbatim from, we no longer have generated stuff in the tarballs that's not in the repository. So the tarball creation process is git archive, and therefore there's no need for any central thing. Anybody who wants to have a tarball from a stable branch, you know, there can be a central choice to make a tag or not, and that's all there is to it. So there's no infrastructure need for doing something, but that we had to make the technical changes so that we were not, you know, doing anything other than file copying in the tarball creation to make that work. So, and I don't know how much, you know, how desirable that would be in the GCC context.
It's mostly the documentation generation nowadays and some flex stuff. So it just reduces the build environment requirements when you use the tarball compared to the SVN.
You need to build it.
Yeah.
We you know, our things generated by Visor or Flex or AutoConf, we just check into the control. So we don't have that problem. And we don't, you know, we don't generate formatted documentation for, you know, any but the current releases that go onto the website.
Regarding possible collaboration on maintaining long-term support branches, I have a question for the distros. As the first step towards that collaboration, that would mean that all the distros and all the big players have their ongoing stable maintenance branches in one place, probably the upstream of Ceph Git repository. So I know Red Hat, I think, does that. Does Canonical and does
Our module is basically that we use the branch in the upstream repository only as long as the corresponding vanilla branch is maintained. And after it closes, we basically switch to just applying patches because it's just.
You keep all those backport changes in your private Red Hat repo.
Yeah, all it's in the source RPMs.
Are there any political issues for you to start putting those patches in on a branch, on a vendor branch in the upstream repo?
It would be possible, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, that's what glibc wants to do because we follow the same model, but we just temporarily haven't gotten to it yet. But what we do use is look at the, like I said, the distro, or I don't even want to say distro because the, you know, embedded IoT, everything. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to exclude those people. That's why we say interested parties in that branch that becomes an LTS branch. So, for example, I worked with Debian, and they had a bunch of local patches, and I said to Aurelian, why aren't you checking these into the stable branch? And so we work with the distros to make sure that the LTS branch, if there's an interested party, it gets attached, and then they keep applying patches so that everyone can use that as a baseline. So for Red Hat for glibc, I think we are putting patches into the stable branches, and we are basing Fedora off those stable continuous point releases. So from Fedora perspective, we are absolutely using that and pushing everything that we can into that LTS branch where we're registered as being the interested party in that branch. So you should be able to see everything that we've put in, the CVE fixes, and in fact, because Florian Weimar does it for Fedora. What? Yeah, for glibc. Yeah. That's all I can talk about is that model to give you guys an idea about, you're going to have to make a value judgment as to, the LTS branches shouldn't cost you anything else. So if they do, you're doing it wrong. Okay? So that's the first thing I'd say. And the second thing is there's a value proposition to review. Well, if we have the LTS branches, how many active point branches with real FSF upstream developers working on them are required?
The thing is,
Guys, we only have 10 or 15 minutes left, so unless we want to have the entire time spent on this, I don't want to cut this off too early, but maybe, just sort of wrap this up. Maybe we need to have this conversation sort of on the side. We can spend the rest of the time. I just want to make sure that we cover any other issues and not just discuss this for the entire time if people don't want to do that.
Just to make one comment from the Red Hat side, I don't see any political issues at all with having the GCC patches upstream. When a RHEL release goes out, the patches are provided as source tables anyway on our HTTP site. So I see no issue at all with having a public branch.
modulo embargoed buttons. Just one thing is that on the Red Hat branches, we sometimes have changes which not everybody might be interested in. So it might be better to just have a common branch where stuff that's most likely interested to all the parties, usually the wrong code issues.
How do you decided that in libc is basically we say the purpose of the stable branch is collaboration for people who are maintaining distributed versions. Every distributed version has some local patches for customizations that not everybody wants, and so what goes on the stable branch is the subset of the intersection of vendor patches. So every distro or whoever that is maintaining a stable package, they say, here I'm using that patch, and if other people who are interested in that stable branch are also using that patch or think it's good, then it goes on the stable branch. And if anybody says, no, that's Fedora specific, that doesn't make sense for me, then it belongs on a Fedora branch, not on a stable branch.
So does it require that it's on a head?
Yes. So in fact, if it's in head, you automatically give the distro committers the right to commit it to the stable branch.
So, but there are also patches that are not on head.
Yeah.
If anything there's sort of automatic blanket approval for anything that is a non-ABI changing fix that is already on trunk.
Not intentionally ABI changing.
Well, there's approval for things that are not ABI changing. Sometimes there's mistaken approval, and there are sometimes fuzzy cases where there is something where it is just a bug fix, but the backport is non-trivial, and then it's a judgment call for the people maintaining that stable branch, whether that backport is worthwhile or to do active review of the technical details of a backport when it diverges from simply being a merge fix-up of the head branch.
That's actually what we already have on the stable branches, because while we support all three of them or both of them, depending on the time, the oldest one is actually much less supported because people start with their patches and consider backporting, and they say, okay, this applies and that's fine, and this applies with this much effort and with this much effort, and so we just give up. And
as David said, is there any other issue we want to cover in this?
Well, also, there's another question that Romana and I sort of had. I'll bring this up. This is that if the GCC community, or maybe, I mean, well, we're the GCC Steering Committee, so I can't speak for others, but if there was a way to have funds specifically dedicated to GCC or glibc, what would people, what are any ideas? I mean, not just, okay, let's go party, but what do people think would be, how would they want to spend such funds? If there are funds that were really dedicated to GCC as opposed to just generally under the FSF umbrella. So
The infrastructure better.
Yeah,
GCC
machines,
or
disks.
The machine.
Some better selection of hardware in the compile farm, perhaps?
Which infrastructure are you talking
So
about?
the GNU org is like separate the SVN from the Baxilla, which gets DOSed all the time. Try to have it somehow separated to make the daily operation work, even if the Baxilla doesn't at some point, for example.
But I can't speak for free, but I would imagine that as what we want for glibc, not just physical resources, but if you're going to spend money, then the greatest thing would be to spend it on a person who helps maintain the infrastructure for various definitions of infrastructure, whether it be the machines, whether it be the web pages, wiki gardening, all that kind of thing. That is, anything other than hacking the code, because hacking the code is what we all do without a great motivation.
Requiring continuous integration for branch patches, not on trunk because that doesn't scale, but for branches maybe it could work.
Dollar investment in hardware, but time investment for people to maintain, build bots and various kinds of web infrastructure and whatnot. So that I think would be the most
I don't know how much people are aware of how little administered gcc.gnu.org is right now. I mean, it's just a couple of volunteers who are keeping all of this stuff running for all of these projects. And
yeah, I think they should have much more. I think every company represented in this room who gets benefit from this central collaboration should not just be putting money into developers working on GCC. They should be putting money, as Red Hat does, into hardware, but putting money in the form of employee time or whatever into helping do that maintenance.
I'll just add something to that from a UK perspective. You can look to companies, but do bear in mind that various countries also have state organisations who wish to promote industry. And actually, I don't know about other countries, maybe other people can speak, but I know Innovate UK, which is the UK government's innovation agency, and spends about £500 million a year promoting innovation, actually is asking for how it can promote technical development. And one of the things that we have put in is that they should consider what infrastructure support they can give to open source, because that open source commercially actually is a market that does not operate in quite the same competitive way as other markets. So in your various countries, you might like to consider asking your governments how their innovation agencies might support, as well as companies. I'm all for companies supporting.
I mean, so we have these very good ideas. I mean, another corollary to that, Dr., is if we had such funds, if there was a way to do it, are there, people, these, the steering committee also is volunteer. It's not a matter of, oh, that's great, you steering committee go off and do it. I mean, are there people who would also be interested if the steering committee could work with the FSF to create that sort of an infrastructure, who would actually be interested in administering that? I mean, this isn't just sort of a wish list of, oh yeah, go off and do this for us.
Well, the problem is we all want to work on the projects that we're working on. We don't want to work on the administration. So the point is to ask for money to hire someone who's interested in administration.
No, I'm not talking about doing the administration of the actual system. I'm talking about the administration of how do we actually, contract these people, or do.
Yeah.
Okay, so
if you have money for glibc, right here.
Okay. I mean, it's a matter of, if the GCC Steering Committee, as a starting point, could go and work with the FSF to get this find a way to have targeted funds. are there people who could then, I mean, so Carlos for GLIPC help then with the I mean, not the, you know, the tax, all the details of actually writing the checks, but in the figuring out how to do the, you know, working out the, you know, the procurement for actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, no, it's separate from fundraising. That's another issue. Spending it, also.
It's the deployment of the funds to to whoever. That's what David's talking about.
That I'm not sure. I don't know who that would be. I mean, I think that's why the way it has mostly gone in the past is that we don't have we don't have a central coffer that gets used for that. What we have is, you know, people who want, funders who want to contribute do it by having their employees spend time.
Right, and there seems to be a suggestion to try to pool those resources. I'm saying if there is a technical and fiscal way of pooling the resources among companies, and we can go to governments or to companies and say, hey, here is a way to target funds specifically to GCC as opposed to the FSF in general or whatever, you know, whether that was a barrier or not I'm not going to get into that, but if we were able to do that, are there then people who could help, who would join in to say, okay, here's how we decide and administer, I mean, again, not the details of writing the checks and all, you know, the details of contracts, but just here is now how we can, you know, help in the guidance, the oversight of deciding how to spend the funds as opposed to let's all go to Barbados or, you know.
I think we could spend some money for travel budgets for some people. For example, URAS is very active maintainer of x86-64. Somebody seen him or not? It would be, I guess, maybe problem is again travel budget for him. And we could use the same funding for younger people, students, for example. That's my proposal.
So, any last comments, last questions that aren't going to take the second hour of this?
Has anybody reached out to the Core Infrastructure Initiative for money? For any of the GNU projects?
No.
Just curious.
Nobody's reached out to the Core Infrastructure project as to date that I'm aware of.
It would be hard to argue GCC isn't core infrastructure. So
Yeah, similarly for LibC as well, because we've
Yeah,
had
but-
like 5 CVEs in the last year.
yeah, so that's probably worth doing.
So, okay.
Fund more Google developers doing glibc development.
Okay. well, Google that and see how to do that. Okay. So, any final comments? Otherwise, you know, steering committee will still be around. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're, you know, the members of the steering committee are listed on the front page, as a link from the front page of the website, and you can reach out to steering committee members, especially the ones who are, you know, visibly active in the community now on the mailing list and in IRC for questions, and we can continue to have these discussions and find out how to continue to improve GCC. So as Richard Stallman likes to say, happy hacking, and thanks everybody for joining us.